Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dev Diary. And folks, today we've got a chonker of a project, so before we get into things, if you're new here and you dig game dev videos, consider subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications so you don't miss future videos. So I thought that we would start the new year off with something small, and a game jam seemed like a good way of doing just that. I found a website that would generate a random game jam theme for me, and it chose Small World. Wonderful coincidence. To which my brain decided that this would be a good time to create a survival crafting game with more of an arcadey edge. Because, you know, this is a game jam and we need to keep things in scope. So I created a survival crafting game with an arcadey edge. Our player handles like you'd expect from a top-down action game, WASD for movement and left-click for action. A nice addition to this game is the player's companion. The companion is integral to the early game as it will automatically harvest nearby sticks and stones for the player. The companion will also prioritize defending the player from any nearby enemy purple goop monsters. Too much combat will take its toll to our loyal friend, and should its health ever reach 0, it'll enter a downed state, requiring the player to press E when nearby to revive it to half health. Now the player is purposefully useless at the start, having to rely on the companion to do early gathering and defending. And I'm actually interested to hear your opinion on this. Like, what do you think about the early game forcing the player to rely on a companion? Because it's through crafting that they become stronger and more useful. With the resources gathered, players can not only build tools to mine better resources, but also craft other buildings to help construct even better and more useful things, like weapons and helper robots. And that's with the overall goal being to gather enough resources to fix the player's rocket and leave the planet. And so progress is set up in a way to help continue pushing the player forward to that goal, because some of the most rarest materials, simply referred to as quote-unquote magic in this world, can only be found hidden in purple goop monsters' nests. However, attacking these nests will summon the inhabitants to pour out and defend their home. But once the nest has been rid of said inhabitants, enough shots will pop it to reveal the magical goodness inside, which is either a magical tree or a magical rock ore that can be mined for magical resources. Something the player can use those magical resources on are more robots. Depending on their type, robots will either harvest ores and rocks, trees, or gather berries. The AI for these robots is a roll of the dice. Either they will choose a nearby resource to their position, or they will choose one at random. And since all of our resources use the same object, to make the process of choosing one easier, anytime a resource is spawned in the world, it is recorded to a list of that type. So trees are in one list, rocks in another, and so on. Now I mention all of this because originally these robots would only target a nearby resource of their desired type. Then I remembered I wrote this entire list system for resources specifically for the robots way earlier in the developmental process. So now the robots will choose between the two options. Mostly so my hard work wouldn't go to waste, but also to make me feel less stupid about completely forgetting that I wrote an entire system. I mean, seriously, anyone else out there, completely forget that they wrote an entire thing for a thing until, they rediscover the thing? Anyway, that's about it for the base gameplay. It's very simple, but the chunkiest of the code came in the crafting system. Something I'm actually really proud of despite it taking way longer than anticipated to make a reality. The entire system is run on enums and struct data. Each item in our game has its own entry, which contains everything from its sprite data to type of resource and even what crafting recipe to reference. Everything else is pretty standard. Check if the player has enough to build a thing, then craft the thing. If it's a resource, add it to the player's inventory, and if it's a building, switch to build mode. The player can then place the building in the world or cancel and get the resources refunded. But what makes this thing so easy to use is the implementation of enums. This allows everything to basically function on labels, making the entire crafting process easier to read and modify. For example, there are several moments in development where things had to be moved around. Like originally, tools and guns were all listed in one category, but the eventual progress line meant that things had to be separated into different lists. So all I had to do was rearrange their order, and just like that, the menus were automatically updated. Also, because enums are just numbers, some simple math is all that we would need to create things like filters or offsets. In other words, while the implementation of all the item data took like over 2 hours to do, the end result was worth it That's simply due to how easy it is to now use the crafting system. And it's probably the thing that I'm most excited about coming out of working on this chunker, and I honestly cannot wait to improve on it in the future. And speaking of this chunker, I feel like I need to justify the ridiculous amount of time that I put into it. Like seriously, this was supposed to be just a tiny project and it almost immediately bloated into something way bigger. So I'm putting this one up on the Patreon. That's right, you too can now battle alongside our trusty loyal friend to take out the local purple goopy wildlife and escape the planet for yourself. And while you're at it, supporting me at the same tier will also get you access to even more exclusive content and downloads, and even early access to the weekly Dev Diary videos before they're released on YouTube. And so what do you think about today's project? Anything that you would add or remove? Also, for any of you developers out there, when was the last time that you participated in a game jam? And what did you end up making? Was it a success, or were you like me and end up trying to do way more than you anticipated? Be sure to leave any and all thoughts in the comments. And finally, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like. But with that said, brings us to the end of today's Dev Diary, so thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.